Can you think of a time when you might have been considered insubordinate?
Might?
Yeah.
I mean, many times when I was a kid, I think.
Probably a lot to choose from, but pick one that comes to mind.
Geez, I don't know. I think I had a leader at one period of my career who wanted to do a daily meeting at 4 p.m. And I had given him feedback saying, hey, we can do this meeting at 8 a.m. or at 6 p.m. Like we can do it beginning of the day, end of the day. Or is like when I'm catching people on the phone. And if you want me selling, you want me connecting with clients, like I got to be on the phone. And the meeting's an hour, way too freaking long for every single day. And he just was committed to having it at 4 for a full hour. And so I just stopped going. And everybody was mad at me and giving me a hard time, but my numbers were better than everybody else's.
He couldn't,
I was like, hey man, as long as my paycheck's up, I ain't going to that meeting.
I remember one time I was at a company, this was a long time ago, and we had one computer in the office. I mean, it was that long ago. There was this a computer room that had it. So there's like one computer and you'd have to sort of schedule time to go work on it. Oh, this is inefficient. And so I just got my own money and I bought my own computer. I had my private computer. And my boss came in and he's like, you can't do that. I'm like, why? I'm like, well, that's not going to be the same system. And, it looks bad for everybody. Like he had all these reasons. I'm like, no, dude, I bought this computer.
Yeah, this is mine.
It's my computer.
I did do it. I will do it.
Yeah, I'm using this. Yeah, he was upset with me for doing that.
So obviously we were right and they were wrong. Today we talk about insubordination and curiosity with our guest, Todd B. Kashdan. Dr. Kashdan is a professor of psychology at George Mason University. He's a leading authority on well-being, curiosity, psychological flexibility, and resilience. He's published over 225 peer-reviewed articles and is the top 1% of scientists in the world. His research is featured regularly in The Atlantic, Harvard Business Review, The New York Times, NPR, Fast Company, Time Magazine. He's a consultant for organizations like Microsoft, Mercedes, Prudential, General Mills, the Department of Defense, and more. We talked a lot about some really great topics. I enjoyed getting curious with Todd, and he, I think, opened our minds a bit. So stick around, be curious. Learn from Dr. Kashdan. I'm Sanger Smith with my dad, Shawn Smith. This is Decidedly.
And then we agreed to wear the same shirt, so that's good also.
Yeah, mine's like way too small and yours is appropriately fitting, so that's good. I'm glad we didn't also wear the same size shirt.
I mean, that's how you get bigger. You just shop at Kids R Us, and as opposed to going to the gym.
Exactly. That's the move. If I just wear really tight clothing, then it looks like I'm big.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate for me because the trend now is really baggy gym clothes.
Is it?
And now, yeah, man. That's what the kids these days are doing, Todd.
80s hip hop? Is that the?
Yeah.
I like the baggy shorts down to the knees.
No, like a pump cover.
I don't even know what that is.
You don't know what a pump cover is?
I have 17-year-old twins, girls. I don't even know what that is. I'm gonna ask them after.
Pump cover. You got to put this is for the real gym goers. You put the big baggy like triple XL shirt on. You go to the gym. You lift.
Oh,
and then once you're fully at the end of the workout, you take it off and you're good. You're in your full form now.
Oh, but I think you do it like mid-workout.
You get those last few sets in while you're really looking good, but you got to build up to it.
Do you take a scissor and like have little cuts so you can like rip it open like the Hulk? Because that feels like a better approach.
If you're not strong enough to rip it off, Todd, you could cut it, but I just do it.
Because you could lose all your Instagram influencers if you make the cut and you can't rip it.
Yeah. One time I got really angry at a soccer game when I was like 14. And in my head, it was going to be a really like cool moment for me.
A Hulk moment and rip the shirt.
Rip my shirt off.
Yes.
And I couldn't even stretch out the collar.
You couldn't get past the collar?
No, it just kind of jerked it a little bit.
It's humiliating.
Yeah, it was bad. You got to stay mad. The thing is, you have to stay mad after that, and then you just look like you got drug around. It wasn't good.
And then your collar's all stretched out.
Yeah. Hey, red card. Go sit on the bench now. Oh,
No. That is
right.
such a great moment because I would just hand you like a Tootsie Roll lollipop at that moment.
Yeah.
Like, hey, this will deal with your anger, little boy.
Yeah. But we learn. We learn.
Awesome.
I'm glad you're here, man.
Yeah, I was looking forward to talking with you. I was, let's say, curious as to what we were going to talk about, just to make a pun. Yeah. What got you interested in going into the field of psychology? That work that.
Well, I mean, it's two things. There's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is I'm a twin with twins, so I have a fraternal twin brother, and being raised by him, he's a little bit like a hermit. Really introverted, really quiet, very pale, looks like one of those extras in Close Encounters of the Third Kind when the light comes out. And then trying to understand him and being a twin, really, I mean, I was interested in psychology from the get-go. And then the longer answer is I worked on Wall Street on the New York Stock Exchange floor. And I love the energy, love the excitement. I mean, I grew up with Wall Street, the movie. And on my free time, I was reading books like The Handbook of Intelligence, The Psychology of Love. And so a couple friends of mine said to me at 3:00 in the morning on some illicit substances, so they asked me, why don't you flip your worlds, man? Why don't you, if you're reading this on your free time, why don't you be a psychologist and just invest your money at nighttime? And that was it. That was what made me go into psychology.
So many of us go into careers based on what some 18-year-old kid on drugs suggests. So that's
I mean, he was playing the harmonica, so he was definitely playing the role very nicely.
Right. Yeah.
So you were talking with your friends that led you into psychology as a field of study, which I thought about. I'm fascinated with that field as well. You took that and really started to dive into some interesting areas. What did you find was the most interesting field of study once you got into psychology?
Thank you. I've had a lot of good collaborators. Well, one of my favorite studies that doesn't get that much attention was what we found was we were interested in people who have social anxiety disorder. And that's actually pretty popular post-COVID, is that basically it's the fear that my deepest character flaws will be visible to other people and you will reject me because of those character flaws. But it's all perception. And it's very impairing. And what we want to know is maybe you don't need therapy. Maybe if you, on days where you are committed to a purpose in life that you have that's bigger than yourself, that your symptoms actually ameliorate by themselves. And what we found was across days, on days when people with this psychological disorder, with significant impairment and distress in their lives, on days when they even committed effort towards their purpose in life, being a good athletic coach, helping animals that, find shelter, whatever your thing was, like taking care of like your nephew, making sure that they kind of, grow in the world. They showed a massive reduction in social anxiety, a massive spike in meaning, and a massive spike in self-worth.
So why do you think COVID caused that phenomenon to increase?
Well, I think it's that you need exposure to all of the sensory modalities to really get the complexity of a social interaction. The idea that you can read someone seems that they're calm and you can watch that their right leg is shaking up and down and there's some movement there.
Oh, okay.
Right. It's just like playing poker. Playing online poker is very different than in person. You want to see the change in people's mannerisms over the course of the game so you can figure out what their tells are. Is it a wink? Is it ends up being like, their facial muscles on their left side but not their right side? Psychology trains you to be a very good poker player and to be a good social partner, to recognize they're irritated, they're excited, they're intrigued, they're exposing their strengths and passions. You have to attend to very specific things. And we lost a little bit during COVID. Now, those of us that are older, we have enough of an anthology of experiences that we're doing fine now, most of us. But for young kids, they missed a developmental window.
So the idea of not being able to pick up on those social clues created some anxiety about maybe people are observing something about me that I'm not aware of. Is that sort of what you're saying?
So there's two ways of hitting this. I'm glad that you hit this, Shawn. So one is, I'm not sure about myself because I haven't sat in a social interaction for too long where I've been received a sense of belonging, connection, love and affection, because you need that in person to get those hormones really activated.
Right.
And the other side of this is pattern recognition. I mean, the reason people make the big bucks in government intelligence, you start to recognize, oh, that person's not just sketchy in the airport. I think they're actually a threat. And you need that threat detection and reward detection mechanism to be developed by seeing multiple interactions over time.
So how do you gauge between an inappropriate level of anxiety about that? In other words, people picking up on social clues that I may be giving out inadvertently versus just normal concern about how I'm behaving? And when does it rise to a level of anxiety?
Great question, because in and of itself, social anxiety is nothing more than early warning social detection system. It is an early warning like, hey, you might get rejected if you keep acting this way. Are you not noticing that the group is taking a step away from you, or people aren't responding and looking towards you when you're speaking in the group? So it's a good thing. Where it becomes problematic is when the frequency is too often, it lasts too long, and it's arising in situations that aren't remotely threatening.
Do you find that people get this socialization early on and either get it right or get it wrong, as a kid, and then that sticks with them kind of moving forward, that socialization?
There are so many pathways for developing excessive social anxiety. So one is what you described. I mean, if you have an absent caregiver in your early environment, you're not getting the secure base that you belong, you are valued, you are loved. And so go hither into the world and explore, because you can always come back into the security of the nest. So that's one pathway. But other pathways is and maybe all three of us experience this. I was talking about this just today to some students, is if you have early bullying experiences, or even in your late teens, I mean, it could leave real psychological scars where you think, I'm not at the level of humor, wit, attractiveness, social attractiveness, kindness, strengths that anyone would find me redeemable and worthy of wanting to have a friendship with me, or much less a romantic relationship with me.
All right. So this may be an unpopular opinion, but do you think there is a certain level of bullying that I imagine that we've all gone through that is not only appropriate, but helpful in the developmental years? Because I think we all experience that. And if we don't, we're going to kind of grow up to be jerks.
It seems like the stereotype is the kids that didn't get bullied, the high school quarterback, the cheerleading captain, the prom king and queen. They kind of peak in high school because they didn't deal with the bullying. And those of us who got, maybe the ones who got bullied too much, you never recover. But if you got bullied an appropriate amount, like Shawn clearly turned out well.
I was bullied an appropriate amount.
A healthy amount.
There's a horrible sociological trend right now, which is overinflating this word bullying to capture teasing or people that are just upset, disappointed, and think you're annoying. So you basically, it's in my nerdy world, it's called concept creep, where the word doesn't mean anything anymore. And you see this with the word trauma, you see this word bullying. Now, there are real traumas. If you're in the front lines in the military and you see your close friend die next to you and you have to use them as a shield so you might survive, that's real trauma. But if someone says your name wrong in a classroom, that's not a trauma. That's potentially nothingness, potentially. And it could be something like a little bit mild. There's a ton of research to support, Shawn, what you're saying, which is basically anti-fragility. You need stress on the system in order to develop your strengths. You need crucible moments and crises to figure out what are you capable of. And you're describing something really well. I remember going back to my high school hometown and seeing this guy was like an icon. He had the most points in his career in the entire county for basketball. Most 3-pointers, most points. And his job when I came back was he climbs telephone poles for Verizon to fix wires when they go. And I'm not making fun of that job. I'm just saying, I'm considering how esteemed he was when I was in high school. I was surprised that that's what he was doing. And I think there's something about the peaking.
Yeah, my dad told me this one time. He said the things that make you popular in high school are not necessarily the things that make you successful later on in life. Those characteristics are usually not the same.
It's a great colloquial bumper sticker that everyone should be having. I mean, just think about being a guy. If you were a guy remotely interested in athletics, the amount of teasing and abuse that to be popular was astronomical. I mean, there were no cameras when we were in school in those days. Those behaviors now would not attract anyone to you for, until long after you're already friends.
So you're saying earlier that the COVID experience caused a lot of people to have a high level of social anxiety because they were afraid that their bad character traits would be visible to others and they would be rejected because of those traits, and that they wouldn't know whether they were being rejected essentially because they can't really read people. So in your experience, I guess both during COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID, whatever, how aware are people in general of what their bad character traits are in the first place?
Great question. There's a whole distribution. You have the whole range of everything you can imagine. I mean, and we're talking about people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s that aren't aware. If you're high in excessive self-confidence, your sense of self-worth is higher than your actual skills, attributes, and strengths. Let's just use that as a definition.
Okay.
It is amazing for people to realize how much of an impact you bragging about things that you think you're better than you actually are repel other people. And to see adults that don't realize this is not an attractive quality. And it's also not an attractive quality to talk about all the amazing things that you've done and accomplished versus asking other people, like, what makes you great? Like, what are amazing qualities they don't know about you yet? That's what people want to meet you at. And then later they can return the question back at you. But people start with these very narcissistic intros to conversations. And it always amazes me as a psychologist how people don't realize what attracts people and what repels people.
Why do you think it persists? Because I agree with you. That's universally rejected by people. That guy's a bragger. That guy's he's just spouting off. We all know.
Don't tell him. You don't say,
all
right, dude, I'm sick of this shit. Like, I was telling Shawn the other day, we were at a conference. This was like 2 or 3 years ago in San Antonio, and this guy was bragging so much that it disgusted me from the entire conference experience. I got up from the table. I didn't think to tell. We drove together. I didn't think to tell Shawn until I was back in the hotel room packing my bags. I said, "Oh, by the way, we're leaving tonight," and we left. I was like, that guy irritated the shit out of me so bad. But I don't go to him and say, "Bro."
They never get that feedback. I guess is what. Yeah.
He thinks something's wrong with me.
Yeah. So great question. What do you think his response would be if you did modulate the way you gave him feedback and said something in your your kind Sanger kind of way? If there's such a thing.
Yeah, I don't know if that exists. I guess maybe the reason why I don't do that is this guy has revealed to me by the nature of the conversation we were having that repulsed me in the first place. He's revealed to me a necessary lack of self-awareness. And so I'm looking at this going, if I even were to give the feedback, probably not going to be well received. And I don't love the guy enough yet. I don't know him well enough yet to push back against
to take that risk.
He's going to resist this feedback. If it's my son, my best friend, somebody like that, maybe I go, "Hey, listen, you need to hear me." But this guy,
So you just described a very interesting maintenance factor for social anxiety is often people don't get feedback because they're not loved enough to start with. Like you're describing, I need to love you a little bit, really like you, that I'm going to invest in giving you some very constructive feedback. And I think people forget about this. I think people often think you give negative feedback to people that are negative, energy vampires in your life, but really you give it to people as a gift.
Yeah. It's like whenever you see a picture of how you used to cut your hair in high school and you go, why did y'all let me do that? That's the response we have is you motherfuckers let me just like that.
I remember doing that to you, letting you do something. And I go, but here's the only requirement I have. I'm going to have to document this with a photograph.
I have to take a picture of this.
You're not going to think it's so cool in 10 years.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of being very upfront with people. If listen, I'm the type of person where I have titanium coated skin, which of course none of us really do. And it's my quick way of saying, if I have like seaweed in my teeth, you tell me. If it ends up being that I'm babbling incessantly when I'm telling the story, I want you basically pinching my butt and telling me, listen, you're done. Like you've been done for 15 minutes. I want to remind people right off the bat. That's what I need. And I think there's really no cultural norm in America, really like any country, where you would kind of tell people, you have carte blanche to go nuts on me because I like you, I trust you, and I need you. Like I need you every once in a while in these social gatherings.
It's hard to take someone up on that offer in my experience. I have a friend of mine who says, hey man, I'm an only child. I talk way too much. You got to let me know. I've done him a disservice as a friend. I haven't let him know. I still find it difficult.
People don't want to do it. I've invited people to give me that kind of feedback before, and I can tell when I'm then violating, when they should be giving me the feedback. I'm violating the thing I told them to tell me about, and they still don't. It's people just don't want to do that.
So Sanger, you gave a really good example because with a little bit of playful sarcasm, you're like, remember that whole only child thing? Like, yeah, it's very clear right now that you're an only child. And so I think this is one of the key maintenance factors in long-term romantic relationships is turning disagreements and problems into playful banter. And there's some good research from Arthur Aaron's Love Laboratory at Stony Brook University of when you see couples that have been together for at least 9 years, one of the greatest predictors of relationship dissolution is it's not the fighting, it's not the teasing, it's the boredom. It's basically like you are unwilling to engage with them when they go there. So it's like if you were in a relationship with that guy who was, the only child, it was the boredom is I'm not going to engage with it. And part of the real thing is you want people to be non-apathetic throughout the long haul of relationships. And I think we underestimate, especially right now, like we treat sarcasm and teasing under that umbrella of bullying. And one of the problems of doing that is one is that you're dismissing real traumas and difficulties, sexual assaults, physical violence, getting your car broken into. But two is you're stealing a very important psychological tool that helps you supercharge relationships.
You're robbing someone of an opportunity for their own self-development.
Like teasing is a great way of giving feedback to someone and building in like little, insider jokes in your relationship. To lose that, man, like you're not at the high level social.
Oh yeah.
Platform.
If you get to a point of apathy in a relationship, that relationship's done. Where you're just rolling your eyes about somebody, you're no longer teasing them or giving them feedback. You're just like, whatever. Don't care.
When I was a relationship therapist, I used to always say, the reason I'm not worried about you guys, and you guys have not stopped fighting for the first 60 minutes of being here, is because you're fighting. Like I can see, and you're laughing while you're fighting. And I can tell this is like perpetual problems. Like couples that come in, the perpetual problem, which is you never do the dishwasher until I ask you. Well, that's going to be there forever. Like, it's not like you can't change someone to be interested and excited to do the dishwasher. And it's actually okay for you to have a relationship where, listen, I'm going to do this because you like it. It's extrinsic motivation because I care about you, but I'm not going to like it. I'm not good at it. I don't want to do it. That happens there. But if you can say it playfully of like the dishwasher thing or however you frame it as the perpetual problem, you've just turned a difficulty into a little bit of intimacy.
So how do we decide to move forward from this point of increased anxiety around our own social awareness? post-COVID. What do we need to do about that to be healthier moving forward?
There's a number of things. So there's great research by Nick Epley, for example, University of Chicago, and he talks about expectancy asymmetries. Now, bear with me because psychologists come up with these very cockamamie terms. And what it is when you go onto a metro, a train, or an airplane, you often think the other person doesn't want to talk to you. And so they just want to put on their headphones, read their book. They're mesmerized by their phone, so you don't say anything. So he tested to see, what do people do? What do people want to do? What happens if it actually transpires? And what he found was most people say that I would never disrupt someone that seems engrossed in an activity in public. When you ask people, would you like to be disrupted if someone had something interesting to say? Everyone's like, oh yeah, absolutely. And then you ask people to actually have the experience happen. You have them experiment. Go talk to a stranger when you're on the train. Go talk to a stranger when you're in the cafe. And you find that people invariably really enjoy these social interactions, the person initiating it and the person receiving it, even though it looks like nobody wants to be socializing. So to some degree, we are all right now a little bit under social, that we're missing opportunities regularly. And as we miss opportunities, we miss data. So our algorithms about who looks like they are open to exchange and who looks like they're closed off is pretty poorly calibrated because we don't have enough experiences in our arsenal.
That's how we get these weird, like, internet sub-personality groups where people get overly interested in, whatever niche topic. And
Furries.
I think, whatever the heck. Like, people are having this this appearance of a social interaction in the comment section of the YouTube video or whatever. They feel like they're having dialogue, and it's like, it's not real. I can't really gauge whether this person is angry at me, whether they're teasing me, whether they're being very serious. There's nothing more depressing to me than looking at the comment section.
Yeah, you don't know if it's a troll or serious.
Yeah.
Just shit posting.
I'm glad that you brought this up because I don't like to rally too much against smartphones because they're not going anywhere and everyone's talking about that. I like the specifics. So I love what you said here. The idea of being trolled online versus in the real world. It's still, we'll put this still in the under the world of teasing. So an online world, it's really like a death knell blow for an interaction to say, were you kidding or are you being serious? It never goes well after that. But in the real world, if I was like, kind of just like Shawn, like took you aside, I'm like, hey, just out of curiosity, like, do you really hate me? And like with the smile on my face, you're gonna be like, Todd, do you seriously think that I hate you? And you're gonna have this like really cute interaction, which there is no writing version of that interaction with Shawn that exists.
Yeah, the internet has made it so easy to satisfy our curiosity in smartphones. I was just thinking about this the other day because, I knew we'd be talking to you and you've got the book behind you on your shoulder about curiosity. And it seems like it is more challenging now with the access to information to be curious. I remember growing up, if we didn't know who caught the touchdown pass in the 72 Super Bowl that won the game, we just had to be content not to know. We just like, well, I guess we just can't know this. Like now we can find out. So have you found that our ability and all the benefits from being curious is diminished now because of the ability to satisfy that curiosity so quickly?
Okay, so you are going to my beloved wheelhouse here of studying curiosity. So there are two different directions this goes. Let me go with the more fun one, which is information gaps. We'd actually like to resolve information gaps between what we know and what we want to know. You gave a great example. So yesterday, my daughter had to give a talk in front of her 11th grade class on Jim Thorpe. And then she was like, do you know who Jim Thorpe is? I'm like, yeah, of course I know who Jim Thorpe is. Like, he's like the greatest athlete of all time, potentially. And then she asked me, which sports did he play? And I was like, it was like a whole bunch of track and field events. I don't know which one. And so at that moment, we could look it up. But I tell my daughter, I'm like, you know what? We're not looking it up. Let's just think about this. Let's take some guesses, play with it. So I sort of have a rule in my social life based on the research on curiosity and at parties, which is you can't Google the answer. So if the three of us are hanging out and we're talking like, hey, what was that movie where Val Kilmer was in the basement and he was like that genius, and then it was like the popcorn, like he started doing it, like started to blow up in the microwave and filled up the entire house. And we can look up what that 80s movie was, but that's not the goal. Because once we start talking about it, then it's like, hey, what else did you see in the theater? Did you ever go to a double feature before? Why don't they have double features anymore? Do you remember like sneaking into R-rated movies? Is that still a thing anymore? And all of a sudden, we go down this really connective, nostalgic way of getting to know each other. All of that would be short-circuited if any one of us Googled the answer. And so I make that a rule. And it's based on the research, which is if you can resist the temptation to satisfy that gap, you have unsatisfied curiosity in the system that's still activated. And I want to maintain curiosity. I don't want to satisfy curiosity when I'm socializing.
What is the consequence of satisfying curiosity in a social setting?
Well, I mean, it depends, right? Because there are things you want to know. So if you start dating someone and you're on day 2 and you want to ask them, hey, have you ever had an infidelity before? You probably would like to have the answer. So that's like a useful information of,
yeah,
do
if
I
she
stay
starts
or do I
making
stay?
me guess, I'm going to be irritated.
So there's the beauty of psychology is there's rarely like a clear yes or no, which is annoying, but it's fun to get into details. Now, in terms of satisfying your curiosity, you get to gain footholds and handholds into this mountain of developing intimacy in a relationship. So what I'm suggesting is that you can gain information without fully trying to finish a conversation as if it's a 30-minute sitcom that we have to wrap up. And that's by not Googling and not looking for the quick out, but more like this is a never-ending quest. And I'm constantly exploring for things.
Okay, so by allowing myself to be curious, guess about what movie Val Kilmer may have been in, then I'm going to be curious about other things necessarily. But if I make a few guesses and then I find the answer, can I still be curious about other things beyond that? Or do I have to just wait till I get home to figure out what the movie was?
Well, I wanted you to imagine the example, because imagine if string theory existed and there were multiverses, 2 different worlds and 2 different parties, which party would you have more fun, be more engaged, there's more energy, and you would develop your relationships better? And I would argue that it's the one where you don't look up the answer, because it's going to have this connective tissue to all these other topics where you have no one has any idea where it's going to go, but it's all going to be very intrinsic. It's going to remind people of other things. And all of a sudden, you're just kind of climbing this ladder, like keep on like collecting more information about each other that you would have never gathered in any other scenario. The starting point of the question leads to all this new information about yourself and other people.
So I'm guessing that the curiosity would help us grow. It helps us gain knowledge. It helps us advance and gain other skills and those types of things. It moves us forward, not just as a person, but as a society. How do we then cultivate more of that, but also calibrate it at the right level? Because I'm guessing you can go too far. We've seen it, a 2 or 3 year old kid. You want to stop them from being so kid. Just stop it. That's enough questions for the day, right? So you can clearly go too far. How do you cultivate it, but then calibrate it?
Yeah. So number of different ways. I mean, if you want to get someone interested in something, you want to figure out how does this connect to what's important to them? Like, what are the concerns of a person? If I was teaching algebra to a bunch of 15-year-olds, I would be starting with, I would ask them, what are your interests? How many people here like sports? How many people like politics? How many people like, international relations and like kind of like about things about different countries? And then I would make all of my examples relating to the topics that interest them. So if you're going to be talking about, the motion, velocity, and you know people are interested in sports, like, hey, do you want a baseball example or do you want to learn about cricket right now? And all of a sudden you're talking through a cricket example of like this, and then as you're describing the algebra of like why the ball actually has this arc once it actually crosses the pitcher and goes into the outfield. You're also talking about, do you know, like when you pitch in cricket, your elbow is not bent, your arm is straight. And so it's this very strange, different muscles that are totally different from being a baseball player. So a baseball player who's a pitcher isn't necessarily good at cricket. And so through all of that, all of a sudden they accidentally learn algebra. But what do we do in our classrooms today? We divorce it from any real world examples that are relevant to what the kids care about. And so they don't remember it. The curiosity sparks the desire to move things from working memory to short-term memory to long-term memory.
So when I think of curiosity, I think of people in my life who some are more curious than others. And the least curious people frustrate the heck out of me. You know, they'll hear something that I say that maybe I want them to ask more questions about because I know it's something that's interesting going on in my life. And they probably had nobody say it to them before and they're just move right on. I had a friend of mine quit her job recently, said, hey, you know, these are things I'm unhappy about. I'm leaving my job. These are the reasons. Her boss just goes, okay, well, we wish you luck. No curiosity about why you left,
right.
What went on,
right.
what are the specific details about these events that frustrated you? And it baffled me, like, how as a leader could you not be curious enough to even ask one question? So what is it about those people? Like the tactic of not Googling makes a lot of sense to me. That's tactical. What is it about the people who are not curious or who are curious? And then how can we change that to become more curious?
So anything you want to train yourself in psychology is you have to first start with psychoeducation. You have to understand what curiosity is. So when I think about this manager, I have my initial reaction is like you, like there's so many things to ask about, not just about your friend, but also to prevent it from happening again. Okay, what could I, like your first question might even be self-focused. What could I have done differently so that this outcome couldn't have happened? And just that bit of information is like amazing, irrespective if you let that person go or not. So why does this incurious person exist? One thing to know is curiosity is inefficient. It's incredibly inefficient. It slows things down. So a friend of mine, Mandy O'Neill, she's an organizational psychologist, and she studies firefighters in firehouses. And what she found was that in firehouses, what you find is that those organizations that are the most harmonious and positive, like they're just all on the same board. They get to accidents quicker. They pull out more survivors out of houses that are burning. But there's a cost, is that they end up having more car accidents on the road and they cause more damage when they're actually trying to save people from burning buildings. That happens there. Those firehouses that are less positive but more receptive to productive conflict, they have fewer accidents, save everybody, but it takes longer. It takes longer to get there. You got to get everyone on board. You got to understand, okay, listen, what are we missing? Why are you taking so long to get onto the fire truck? Like, is there some reason this happened? And you're conversing about it. You're arguing with them. You're engaging that happens there. So there's always a trade-off. And I think leaders, parents, kids, everyone has to understand that it takes more energy to describe something in an intriguing manner than just lay out the facts as bullet points. I can answer all of your questions as just curiosity leads to higher perseverance, more learning, and ends up reducing the likelihood of degenerative brain diseases. And that's the end of our conversation. Or I can describe it in these anecdotes and these stories so that it's more memorable. It's an inefficiency in the system.
Well, it's also, in addition to an inefficiency, I think there is a level of vulnerability and openness somebody has to possess to be able to explore the decisions they've made. Right. Let's get curious about why we made this choice and what other choices we decided not to do, and be able to explore that. Some people don't want to do that.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And I think about this as someone who's also interested in sports psychology and helping athletic teams at the cultural level of the group. What are your norms? Are your norms about everyone agreeing with the captain and the coach? Or is it whoever has the best idea, make sure you bring those ideas to the forefront? And I think even though you reduce the speed to accomplishing your goals, you kind of want the latter. Now, that also means is that not all ideas are good ideas. Not all questions are good questions. So you can design it in there, but take the risk. This goes exactly like, Shawn, what you're saying. Take the risk of throwing it out there, knowing it might be amazing gold. It might be one of those diamond L's, like the, those fake diamonds that they sell that happens there. But throw it out. You will be rewarded for at least experimenting with better ways constantly of doing things.
So you bring up an interesting point. So when does the level of curiosity, if I'm in a hierarchy structure at work or organization or something like that, when does my curiosity get to a point of insubordination?
Well, I mean, I just wrote a book called The Art of Insubordination, saying I think we have too much of a negative view about insubordination. I think we need to parse out, when is it principled and when is it unprincipled? I think in too many systems, such as the military, that they punish people just because you disagree with your authority figures. You're out of line, not because of what you said. You actually had a great idea, but because you're not at the caste system level where you should be questioning the general. And I think those are sometimes the newcomers have the best ideas because they're not inculcated in all the theories and ways people have been doing things. So they ask the question, wait, why are we like why do we have a tax code where nobody can do it no matter how smart they are on their own? Why can't it just be 2 pages? Like, why is this so complicated? If we spent money to create a 2-page tax return, the money we would save would offset all of the people that try to fool the system. But nobody has asked these simple questions about kind of like, how can we inside the IRS? You need a newcomer to say, this doesn't make sense. And that insubordination is helpful because you're trying to be constructive. You genuinely believe this, and you care about the health and longevity of the IRS because roads and the electric grid needs tax dollars. So we can't get rid of it. So they care about fixing it. That's why they're being insubordinate.
Yeah, I was in the Corps of Cadets at Texas A&M. So Texas A&M's senior military college. They're one of 7 non-service academy, but they have a full cadet corps at the university. And so it's like military school within a normal school. And when I was there as a freshman, your job as a freshman is to just get yelled at and have all of your individuality like stripped from you, right? So just like being in basic training for the Army, but it's your entire freshman year of college. And I remember one day about maybe 6 weeks into the first semester, we were told by one of the retired lieutenant colonels who kind of worked for the program to kind of make sure that we didn't haze each other too much. He comes in and he says, all right, y'all are all like, you've been screwing up. You've been punished. You're doing bad. You're really screwing up. And one of the guys goes, well, what did we do? He goes, man, if I have to tell you, then you really suck. And we were like, well, you're telling us to like run 5 miles in the blistering heat with, long sleeve shirt and pants on. Why are we doing this? And the guy goes, when I was a freshman at this school, we didn't ask why. We didn't ever ask why. We just did what we were told. And it was in that moment that all of my buddies lost respect for this guy because we were like, whoa, we're not allowed to ask why. I mean, none of us were saying we're not going to run until you ask us why. Right. We weren't saying, hey, screw you, buddy, you're not my dad.
It was from a place of curiosity, not a place of rebellion.
We were like, well, we want to get better.
Right.
Help us.
We don't want this to happen again.
Yeah, I don't want to do this tomorrow. And sure enough, he was fired that summer. But it was that has stuck with me for so long because it was such a comical example. Like, how did this guy have his entire career in this structured format, right? And still not be able to, it's so averse to just that curiosity that we're presenting.
Yeah, it's a very illustrative example because everybody has this rank order of moral foundations. And so this person, I imagine, is authority and obedience are like at the top. I mean, I know that's very common in the military, but some of the greatest generals actually don't have that. They actually have appreciation and love, like actually loving them like brothers and sons and siblings. I mean, that's why people are willing to die for people on the front lines.
Yeah.
So when you get this authority and obedience is the number one value. The problem with that is sometimes there are better ways of doing things. And the DNA of a group, whether it's cadets or whether it's, whether we're talking about Navy Buds or what, Navy SEALs, whatever we're talking about, the DNA changes depending on the diversity of strengths and personalities in that group. And to me, the best leaders have a strength called personalization, where they now tailor how they're going to do things based on learning about the characters that I have in my team. I mean, if you want to be the best coach or leader, you got to figure out like what you have. And you can't assume they're just interchangeable bodies. New freshmen come in, same thing as last year. And then, treating it that way. I think that's the wrong approach to leveraging the strengths so the group is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, just running people through your regimented program it isn't going to work at a high level. It seems to me like one of the reasons why that exists in the hierarchy of a lot of organizations is because if obedience and authority is your ultimate value, like you're going to progress. You're not going to be at the bottom rung of the ladder for your entire career. You're going to move up. You're probably never going to reach the top. You're not going to be the CEO or the general, most likely. Maybe there's some bad ones out there. You're probably not going to reach the top. You're going to be somewhere in the middle. Not to say that everyone in the middle follows this value set, but in the middle, there's plenty of people that do. And so people get the unfortunate experience of having someone, upward in their chain of command who values that. And it either squashes them and gives them a lot of distaste for the organization as a whole or for leadership as a whole. And they develop these radical ideas like, oh, every CEO is just some bumbling idiot, who doesn't deserve where he is, because they had the misfortune of having a manager who was all about obedience and authority.
All right. This is Sanger. This is great stuff. This is like a choice point everyone has. Are you going to live a life choosing security or choosing growth? And you're going to have this option regularly at different points in your life. And what you're describing is, I'm going to choose security, stability that happens there. So I am perfectly content making $101,000 a year, being middle management. I have no higher aspirations, and I just get to kind of stick along for 70 straight years to happen there. And there are others of us that are often, Shawn, you were mentioning the kids that ask too many questions, who ask the why, are curious about why we do these things this way. Hey, I have some ideas of some other ways of doing this. Why are we not doing media like as for the New York Times, like on TikTok and Instagram? This is where everyone is right now. If you want the next generation succession of readers, this is why, mainstream media is dying. Do you want to grab them or not? It's not going to be someone my age. It's going to be someone who's around 25 that brings up this idea. Those people are not thinking about safety and security. They're thinking about, I think I could I want this thing to be the greatest possible thing. And that's why I'm investing my life into this. There's a sense of meaning. There's an ultimate concern there. And so those are the people that you want to hire. They can be annoying because they're going to push and probe you and constantly like they're not going to be content with the way things are. But you have to ask yourself, what do you care more about? Meaning, profundity, and bringing potential into greatness? Or do you just want to keep things as they're going?
I remember several years ago, I hired a new advisor. He was so energetic, like really from the first day I met him, I was like, oh man, I can't wait to have this guy be on my team. And week one of him working with us, he sees our filing cabinet. Now, the filing cabinet was such a meaningless thing in the terms of the operations of this company. We hardly ever used paper files. It was in the rare occasion that somebody wanted to leave a copy of their will with us or something. But like in general, everything was digital anyway. So it was kind of more of a tradition to even have the paper files than it was like really important. And so he goes in there and he notices all of the files are organized by advisor, but not totally. Like some advisors were grouped together. So we'd have John and Steve's clients in one cabinet, and then Shawn's in his own cabinet, and all kind of like mixed and match instead of just A to Z every single client. And so the trouble for him is he was like, he didn't know who the advisor was necessarily when he was told to go grab, Todd's client file. And so he just takes it upon himself. He's like, obviously, this is totally stupid. I'm going to organize them A to Z, like top to bottom, instead of by advisor. And every other admin on the company, like, started throwing rocks at him. This is the worst thing you've ever done. You've fucked up the entire system. And it was because he didn't know he didn't stop to ask first, right? He just took it upon himself. But he didn't know what they knew, which was we've divided the work amongst certain groups of people to support these advisors, and we actually have organized it by support person, not by advisor. And so it was a good system. It was unfortunate for him because it turned him off from ever bringing up an idea ever again. Like the backlash was so strong. He was like, I know nothing. I can't even get the paper files correct that y'all don't even use. And he just couldn't ever allow himself to like go back to bringing that curiosity to the table.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple questions that someone asks before they dissent or deviate from how things are doing. One of the questions they ask in their head, especially someone, I'm imagining someone young who works in your company, this energetic person, is they ask, if this idea I have is so great, why hasn't someone done this before? Because I'm not the smartest person in the room. So it's like this very humble question. And then the second question that you ask, before dissenting and deviating, is, am I willing to absorb the friction and potential negative evaluation that's going to come because I know I'm going to be pushing around the status quo a little bit? A lot of people turn off because of the humility question, which is, I don't think I'm smart enough to be asking something no one else has asked before. This might be the dumb question. That's kind of what happened there. Somebody needed to step in and say, I'm going to deconstruct what you did. I love the framework. It was just the wrong thing you were doing. But bring that energy to other tasks. A lot more people end up burning out because they can't handle the friction. They can't deal with the fact is everyone looks at you and says, wait, you're going to create more work for me? I have to learn your new filing system. Like, who are you? Like, who the hell are you? I want to get out of here at 4:30 p.m. and beat traffic. And so this is the inefficiency of a dissenter.
Yeah.
They're so valuable, but to be effective as a principled rebel, you have to sell why spending more time for the upfront cost is worth it. I'm going to save you energy, attention, and money down the road.
One of my favorite things to watch at jiu-jitsu is when a new practitioner does not have that humility with their questioning and their curiosity. So, our coach will be teaching a particular move. Okay, I want you to grab his wrist, then put your elbow here and move it in this way. And to someone who has maybe had like a month of training, they may think that they can see a flaw with it. Right? Because they're looking through a very narrow lens of what they know and understand. And so occasionally, most of these guys are smart enough to go, that doesn't make sense to me, but I'm just going to do it. All right? Because coach has clearly done this for a while. He's been a black belt for longer than I've been alive. He might know what he's talking about. But every now and then there's one that goes, well, coach, why doesn't he just do this to defend what you're doing? And every time coach goes, okay, try it. Like, you're now in front of the class. See how that doesn't work? All right. Never ask a question again. You're banned from asking questions for 3 months. And I love it. I love it. And sometimes those guys stick with it. A lot of times those guys, they do stop training. But every now and then they go, oh, okay. And it takes a couple times and they learn and they humble themselves and then they don't quit.
So I would guess that when you look at the spectrum of a company that has a lack of curiosity, then there's a lot of stagnation there. Nobody's innovating, nobody's growing, nobody's trying new things. On the other end, if you have too much insubordination, you've got chaos. And the best companies have calibrated the right amount of that. Have you seen specific tactics or things that companies do that have it right?
Oh yeah. I mean, one of the best ways is taking this checklist manifesto that started in surgery and bring it into organizations, which is, okay, we're just, no matter how smart we think we are, we all have a lot of things going on. So just check. Did you check which knee that you're going to be working on today, left or right? Like, did you make sure that like the instruments are, sanitized? Did you make sure that you have enough antiseptic medication in case something goes awry? Because if you have to wait, 5 minutes, that could be, life or death situation. The idea of, we go into meetings in workplaces and we just go along with the way it's always been. You have 3 people who eat up 80% of the airtime. Often the boss speaks first as opposed to last on every time someone brings up an idea, which means you're going to get compliance publicly, but you don't know what they actually think, because they know. And Sanger, you brought this up before, is if I agree with the boss and they already state their opinion with great vehement energy, then that's probably the best thing to do, even though I disagree with where it's going there. The best organizations have almost like charts that you have to check. You have to physically acknowledge them and kind of write your initials or write something of, how are you going to make sure that a minority voice is going to be heard today? How are you going to make sure that you're not going to rely on unanimous decision making and people can disagree before you make a decision? Make sure someone offers some disagreement point before you make a decision. You want those people to point out. You don't want the flaws once the product is rolled out. You don't want the flaws after you sign the merger and you realize that company has a lot of problems that you didn't think about. You want those people bringing it up early. So the best companies have a chart of specific norms that are diverging from harmony and positivity to say, we're focusing on the tasks, not the relationships, but I want to see some disagreement, independent thinking, and autonomy.
I think when you get into meetings and you have companies that are asking those right questions, you're going to get a better result. I mean, there's some, what was that AI thing that Google just put out? They obviously didn't ask a lot of questions.
Gemini?
The Gemini. Yeah. I mean, clearly nobody was asking the right questions because it was just giving garbage results. But you gotta ask those. You gotta be open enough to be vulnerable to ask the questions about what would be a different way to do this. A lot of times if I look at solutions, I'll think about, well, what would be the opposite approach? I have one that I'm thinking about, but what would be an opposite approach? And it gets me to kind of break through and think about things differently. Or what would absolutely not work as a. And interestingly enough, a lot of times that thought exercise brings me to another solution. Right. So it's I just think you're right. You got to ask those questions.
What was that automated car, Wayfair? It was.
Oh yeah.
A Wayfair car?
It was
autonomous, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was an autonomous car. Yeah. And then it ran over, 1 out of every 13,000 pedestrians. Everyone went berserk, and then it disappeared. When in reality, if you compare it to humans, 1 in 13,000 or whatever the number was, it was much better than humans. But the idea that a robotic car is driving around and could kill anybody, there's a good portion of the planet that always gets up in arms. But here's the question that they forgot to ask. When faced with these ethical dilemmas, either you're going to smash into the car in front of you, or you can run over a person on the sidewalk. One of those two things has to happen. What are you going to do? So these are these ethical dilemmas that you have to think through these things when you're creating automation that's going to go on the road. And the thing is, they skipped a lot of these philosophical questions. What you think is, we'll build the machine, it could run, it's going to be fine, it's better than a human, but not thinking about the ambiguity. And I think, Shawn, that's what you're kind of really hitting here with these questions, which is we're going to face ambiguity. There's an obstacle and setback waiting for us. We don't know what it's going to be. So let's ask the question, if everything worked exactly as planned, how do we think this will go? If we ends up being in 3 months that a competitor does exactly what we do and then files a lawsuit against us saying that they have property rights, what are we going to do? You need to be thinking about these things. It's called defensive pessimism. You're hoping for the best, but you're bracing for the worst, and you're thinking about plan A, B, C, D, and E. And in the military, they do this all the time. I mean, they always assume of, all right, let's have the backup to the backup to the backup. And I think a lot of organizations get a little bit Enron-ish and think they're the smartest people, and they don't have to worry about what external constraints are going to hit them later.
Todd, what would you say is your final decision-making tip for leaders?
Figure out who the adversary is going to be for your idea. Don't confront them in public. Confront them privately and let them know, I think you're going to be the one that's going to attack this. I would love to hear your opinions now and make this better. Make your adversary your collaborator. And this way you do some psychological jujitsu and improve your ability to be persuasive.
That's great. Todd, where can people find you and connect with the work that you're doing?
I mean, everything's for free. I've got over 200 scientific journal articles, all for free on my website. You can join my Substack for free at toddkashdan.com.
All right, Todd. Thanks again for being here.
Todd, come back anytime. Thanks.
Yeah, you guys are great.
My takeaway from talking with Todd is, not surprisingly, around curiosity. When we were looking at making decisions, is being able to go back and explore why we made that decision and asking ourselves, what would a new owner of our company do? What would, if I had a magic wand, what would I do? What would be an opposite approach to this solution? Really fully thinking through, why did I make this decision that caused me to shut off other solutions? And I think a lot of times we just roll through because we're so busy that we don't think through thoughtfully enough why we made a certain decision. And if we don't, we never get better at decision making.
My biggest takeaway was what he shared at the end about finding who's going to be my opponent, my adversary, when I bring up an idea to my team, and encouraging them to help me instead of kind of blindsiding people all at once. And I think if I can see how the impact of that would be really positive for my team.
You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate your support. It helps others find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more daily decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com and on Facebook and Instagram at decidedlypodcast. Thanks again for listening. I'm Sanger Smith, and this is Decidedly.
Insights, advice, and comments provided by Shawn Smith, Sanger Smith, and speakers identified as part of the Decidedly podcast should not be considered recommendations. Speakers not identified as members of Decidedly are expressing their opinion, and their statements should not be construed as reflecting the views of the Decidedly team. This podcast is produced solely for informational purposes, not personalized advice.